What's good, everybody? This week we're sort of trying goddamn hard to stay innocent with J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. Let's peruse, shall we? This is Holden Caulfield. Currently, he is feeling pretty run down and is resting up in some place where they have psychoanalysts that can ask you questions about what you are going to do when you get out. He doesn't want to talk about that, though. He wants to tell you about this time last year as a 16-year-old just before coming home from school for Christmas break. It's a Saturday. He's just failed out of this fancy schmancy school, Pensy Prep if you want to know. He's only failed out of like 100 of these schools at this point. He doesn't have to be home until Wednesday though. That's when all the regular academic achievers will get let out for the holiday. He decides he'll visit his old history teacher, Spencer. Nice guy, a bit old. The teacher keeps asking him about adult things though. Where's your life going and all that, but in a I'm doing a bad job at not being condescending kind of way. Holden doesn't want to think about adult stuff. He just wants to know where the ducks go when the winter freezes over. Holden heads back to the dorms. He puts on this red hunting hat he got in New York for $1. It's got this vibe like a good hat for going from one point to the next. He runs into these guys, Ackley, Unhygienic, and Stradlater, man-whore. They want to know why Holden wasn't at the big game. He tells them that he lost the fencing team's equipment on the subway. Stradlater asks Holden to write him an essay with a lot of adjectives about a house for English class because he doesn't know where to put in the commas, like a chump. Holden doesn't feel like writing about houses though, so he writes about his kid brother's baseball glove that is covered in handwritten green ink poetry. Kid brother's not alive anymore. Bad things happen to kids too, I guess. Holden finds out that Stradlater went on a date with this girl Jane he used to know. Used to date / love a little bit actually. She was practically perfect in every way, and he misses those times from his youth. Stradlater's not telling about how far he got with her on the date. First base, third base, mum's the word. The idea of Jane and Stradlater makes Holden go a little crazy and he starts throwing hands. It's like Stradlater is corrupting this innocent part of Holden's youth and he has to do something about it. Holden decides he can't wait around until Wednesday. He doesn't have to go home, but he can't stay here. He puts his red people hunting hat on and gets on a train bound for New York. He likes to wear the hat backwards. He's sitting there, feeling blue. He had wanted to make progress, but now he's not feeling it. All of a sudden, this lady gets on the train. She's one of the moms of a guy he knows from Pensy. Her kid, in Holden's opinion, is without a doubt the biggest bastard ever to go to Pensy. But he thinks he'll have some fun with her. He tells her how great her son is and how everyone loves him at school. All of a sudden, he realizes that this woman he's talking to is an adult, and adults have sex. And maybe this adult would like to have sex with him because he's on his way to adulthood. But he loses his nerve and gets off the train at Penn Station. He leaves all his stuff in a locker at the station and then gets in a cab to Central Park. He's making idle small talk when he thinks about the ducks again. He wants to know where they go. What happens to them after they've made the transition to a new season? He asks the driver about it, who gets pissed that he's asking such random questions out of the blue. He gets out of the cab and checks into a hotel. From his hotel room he can see some strange things. Adult things. There's a man cross-dressing. There's a couple laughing and spitting water at each other. Is it foreplay? All this adult stuff is beyond him. But maybe he can learn about it? He remembers this number he has for a girl that may or may not be a prostitute. He calls her up. He's got time and money and a hankering for adulthood. But it's late and she's not free till tomorrow. He loses his nerve and hangs up. Holden heads downstairs to the hotel lounge area looking to get some cocktails, but the waiter sees that he's a minor and won't serve him. Even with the 6 inches of height he's put on this year, it's not enough. He sees these girls in the lounge area. They're in their 30s, out-of-towners just hoping to see a celebrity in the city. He flirts with them and gets one on the dance floor. He tries to talk her up, but she basically completely ignores him. He's too young for her. He's like, "What, I'm not young? Look at all this gray hair I have." He actually does have a lot of gray hair too. He's not kidding. The girls get bored with him and leave, forcing him to pick up the tab for their whole table. Freaking adults, man. He tries to call his ex, Jane. He starts thinking about Jane and their backstory. They met on summer vacation. He taught her how to play golf, and she liked to line up kings and checkers and just leave them in the back row. They would hold hands at the movies for the whole film. There was this one time, though. Her stepfather was there and she started crying, and Holden kissed her several times on the face, but just couldn't get to her mouth. Maybe the idealized version of young love wasn't actually so ideal? He wants to get out, so he takes a cab to a jazz club. On the way, he asks the driver about the ducks again. This driver gets even more annoyed than the last one. At the club, he runs into one of his older brother's exes and her date. She's very nice, but he isn't in the mood to sit with them, so he puts on his hunting cap and heads back to the hotel. He's heading back to his room, feeling off. But the hotel is bougie, so it has an elevator operator. Turns out he's a pimp. He's like, "You want a girl for the night?" And Holden's like, "Sure, why not?" A bit later, this girl Sunny comes to his room. She's super young, not much older than Holden himself. He starts to feel a little peculiar about all this. He decides, you know what, let's just talk instead. She's not so sure what to do about that, but she still wants her money. Although now she's asking for double what the guy in the elevator said. Holden won't pay the extra bucks, so she leaves and comes back with the pimp, who punches him in the stomach and takes the money anyway. Why can't adults just be straight shooters? Holden is pretty rattled and turns in for the night. In the morning, he calls his ex, Sally, and wants to meet her for a show after lunch. Things weren't great with Sally, but it's familiar. He gets some breakfast and meets these two nuns. They're sweet, and they chat about Romeo and Juliet. Holden doesn't feel understood, but they're nice and all. He gives them some money as a donation. He thinks calling Jane would be a good idea, but her mom answers instead. Holden goes to Central Park to look for his sister Phoebe. He knows she hangs around these kinds of places. He sees a girl tying her skates. Not a bad kid. He helps her tie those skates up. Gotta keep those kids from falling and getting hurt if you can help it. She tells him Phoebe is usually in the museum this time of day. But it's Sunday. The museum's closed. He likes the idea of the museum, though. Nothing ever changes in a museum. It's a place where time freezes. He heads over there, putting his red hunting cap on as he goes. But when he gets there, he realizes it's not such a great idea, so he goes to meet Sally for the show instead. After the show, that Holden was unimpressed by, they go to Radio City to ice skate. They are both trash at skating though, so they go inside to get a drink and relax. Holden starts trying to explain what's been eating at him, why he's been all over the place the last few days. Things build and build until finally he just asks Sally to run away with him. She does not understand what he's talking about at all and leaves angry after he laughs at her. Again, he tries to call Jane, the idealized ex from the past, but there's still no answer. So instead, he calls this guy Carl Luce that he knew from school. They arrange to meet. He goes to see a movie to kill some time, even though he hates movies. Everything is phony in the movies. Nothing is real. Later, at the bar, Holden tries to draw Luce into explaining some things about sex. Luce had a reputation for being open about that stuff at school. Once again, though, Holden isn't communicating well. He doesn't convey his reasons for wanting to talk, and after a bit, Luce gets up and leaves early. Feeling frustrated that Luce wouldn't answer his questions, Holden gets hammered and walks out into the snow, intent on checking on the ducks in Central Park. On the way out the door, he shows his red hat to the coat check girl, who is only moderately impressed. After almost falling into the pond while looking for the ducks, Holden makes his way to his parents' apartment to try to talk to his kid sister Phoebe. It's super late though, and he doesn't want to have to talk to his parents, so he sneaks in and wakes up his sister. She wants to know why he's home from school early. He's forced to admit that he got kicked out. Again. He tells her he just wants to be like that guy in the poem, the catcher in the rye. Someone who stands in the field and catches the children who are wandering too close to a cliff so they don't fall off. He just wants to protect the innocent and keep them from the horrors of growing up. Phoebe tells him that he is remembering the poem wrong, and that's not how it goes, but he doesn't listen to her. Their parents come home and Holden leaves so he doesn't have to talk to them, but he gives Phoebe his red hunting hat on the way out the door. He doesn't want a transition. He's tired and he's rejecting the idea of growing up. He calls his former English teacher, a guy named Anatoly. He's very accommodating. "Come on over," Anatoly says, even though it's like 1 in the morning. They talk about the future for a bit. Anatoly seems to be finally hearing what Holden has to say. It's super late, so Anatoly makes up a bed on the couch and Holden passes out. He wakes up not long after to Anatoly stroking his forehead while he sleeps. This, understandably, freaks him out, and he bolts out of there as fast as he can. Not sure where to go to next, he heads to Grand Central Station, the great crossroads, and finds a bench to sleep on till the morning. Holden decides he's had it with everything. Friends, family, phony adults, people who won't answer his questions, he's through. He goes to his sister Phoebe's school and asks someone to get her a note. He wants to meet her at the museum to say goodbye before he skips town. She takes longer than expected, and he's getting worried when, unexpectedly, she shows up with a suitcase wearing his red hunting hat. She wants to run away with him. He can't let this happen. It's not her turn to grow up yet. She has to stay young and innocent. He gets super angry and shouts at her to go back to school. She refuses and starts to cry, and Holden feels sorry for the way he treated her. Holden convinces angry Phoebe to go to the zoo with him. They walk together and see a carousel. Holden convinces Phoebe to go for a ride on the carousel, even though she's maybe a bit big for it. He watches her go around and around, and finally starts to feel a little happiness. He thinks about the carousel going around in a circle instead of in a straight line and thinks maybe his own situation of going from innocent to mature is also something that goes around and around. Realizing this while watching Phoebe makes him feel just so damn happy. That's the end of the story Holden wanted to tell. Back in the place where he's being taken care of, he tells us he's planning to go back to school in the fall, and he's feeling cautiously optimistic. Well, that's all for today, folks. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next time.